Welcome to your first GIS 300 lab. Today I'm going to walk you through the steps required to make this map that shows the roads and the streams in downtown Fort Kent and the areas that are nearby both of them. So these are places where some road salt might be found around the riparian buffer around a stream. So what I've done is I have input data, these lines that form the streams right down the middle, and the roads as well. And I apply a buffer which creates this polygon that goes around each one of these, and that's a 75-foot distance, as you can see in this legend. And on the roads I put a 40-foot buffer. And the question we're asking is, if we were concerned about road salt getting into either the stream or the soil nearby the stream, we would look in these locations for any salinity in the soil. So I have a scale bar up here that shows you, if you're measuring exactly this distance on the map, that corresponds to 500 feet, or if this is printed out on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, 1 inch on that map will equal 667 feet. I've labeled Route 11, 161, and 1, and I've provided a north arrow with a star indicating this is true north. Magnetic north would be 17 degrees off here. The title gives an overview of what the entire map is showing. So this is the output. This is a PDF that happens to be georeferenced. If you are familiar with the Avenza Maps app, and you will be soon, this is a file that you could email to yourself, open up on your cell phone, and as you walk around, the little dot that is you would start right here at the armory, and as you walk around you could see exactly when you're at this location. You could snap a photo, plot that photo right there, walk around just like the Marauders map in Harry Potter if you're into that. So, also every video game ever. So I'm going to minimize this and show you what it looks like in ArcMap. So this is the layout view of the map that produced this. So it looks a lot cleaner when it's exported. It's a little bit rough in here because it has to draw over and over and over. So let's get rid of that. That is the finished product, and let's start this from scratch. On your desktop you have student materials. If you don't have this folder, or these computers get a little scared of strangers, so you might have to log out and log back in and tell it your name again so you're not strangers anymore. So double click on that and then go into Datasets for Student Use. GIS Applications 1, Lab number 2. And these are all the data that you'll be using. Come back to that in a moment. Now click on the Start menu and type in ArcMap. You'll see ArcMap 10.6.1, and that is the app that we're going to use. When this loads in, it's going to open up with a screen asking if you want to open a new map or if you want to open a map that you've used previously. Because this is your first lab, you will not have anything previous to this, so you will go ahead and create a blank map. So this is the dialog box you'll get. You can go to New Maps, Blank Map, and it might pop up just like that for you. And now hit OK. And that will open up a blank iteration of ArcMap. Now, what you're going to want to do is go back to that lab number 2 folder, and you can just hit Control A to select everything, and then click, hold, drag, release into the table of contents like so. Now mine is defaulting to not showing these things, so they're unchecked, meaning they don't show. I'm checking them on one at a time. And we're actually not going to use these second 2 for now. We're just going to use the salted roads and the streams. And the reason I have this set to not display at first is sometimes I work with huge data sets and it crashes the computer if you try to load in too many at once. So we can use the scroll wheel to zoom in, zoom out. So zooming in, zooming out, you can see the detail in these roads here. There's the stream, Hannaford's is in here, Shop and Save, sorry. Let's see, so there's the Fish River, and it's come in. It doesn't know what these things are. It's just lines is just data. It doesn't know that a stream should be blue and a road should be red. We have to tell it. So if you go over here to the table of contents and click on that line, you get some options. Let's just go with highway ramp. These aren't ramps, but it's a good width to display. More on that later. Okay. And I've done that wrong. I've shown the streams in red. That makes no sense at all. So now I can go back here and change this color to, and I've just hit this little drop down. Let's go with Cretan blue. And that'll keep the width of 1.7, which is good. So now we have blue streams. That's starting to make sense. Let's do that again for the salted roads and make that the highway ramp. So now we have roads in red and streams in blue, and that makes good sense. So now we are getting into the geoprocessing operations. So we know where the streams are, allegedly, and we'll see some flaws in this data set at the end. But this is the center line of these streams. It does not have width. If you keep on zooming in, it stays the same width. It's just a line connecting 2 points. And what we want to do is provide a buffer. And a buffer is a polygon that is generated by setting a distance, and best to just show you so you see how it works. So under geoprocessing at the top, buffering is probably the most common tool that you'll use in any natural resource application. So buffer, geoprocessing, buffer. And it needs to know which of these data sets to operate on, so we're going to use this drop-down menu and say I would like to start with the streams. Let's think about that. And we want it to have a distance of 75 feet. And it defaults to meters because most of the world uses meters. But if we use this drop down, we can select feet or any one of 10 or 12 other things. And now we can type in, we want a 75-foot buffer. And the last thing we have to do before we hit OK is change this dissolve type to all. And that means that we'll have one continuous buffer for all of these streams. And I encourage you to set that to none and see what happens. Nothing will be harmed. You'll just see why I do this. So, okay. Executing buffer, good. And again, mine defaults to not showing, but let's check that on, and there it is. And it's coming in as a polygon with a fill. So if we zoom in here, we can change the color of that because we don't need a green stream buffer. Click on that little green swatch, and let's set that to be hollow. And if you don't have that, you can just hit fill color, no color. Let's change the outline to the same color as the stream, Cretan blue. And that shows us that this buffer is associated with that stream feature. Now we'll do the same thing for the salted roads. Geoprocessing, buffer, input features, salted roads, units, feet, distance, 40 feet. This is arbitrary. You could set any other distance, but for this exercise we'll use 40. And dissolve type, all. Okay. Close. Turn that on, and you can see a 40-foot buffer created around those roads, and we'll make that a nice hollow and red to match the roads. So now you can see where we're going with this. We're looking for those areas where the buffers of the roads and the streams overlap, because road salt poured onto this road here could end up in the area that drains right into this stream, and that could be bad or it could have no effect, but if you want to measure what that is, you need to know where it is you're looking. Now you could zoom around and find every one of these and mark them off and add that to your to-do list, but GIS is not about that. The GIS is about automating these difficult tasks so they are repeatable and reliable. So our next geoprocessing tool is Intersect. Third most commonly used one. Intersect. And the input features are going to be our two buffers. So input buffer, same drop-down menu, buffer. So now we have these two together. Now we can hit OK, close, turn that on. You see it has now created a new polygon feature that is only those areas where those two features overlap or intersect. We can change that to be a nice black color. Let's change the outline color to no color and the fill color to be black, and that will show where those two things intersect. So all of those areas are identified. If we want to zoom out to all of those areas that have been identified, we can right-click, zoom to layer, and now we have a view of everything. We only want to know about the downtown stuff. We have many other locations that have been identified here out on Route 1 here, but we just want the downtown spots. So now we've done all we can do in the layout view, or the data view, I'm sorry, and we need to switch over to layout view. So down here we have the ability to toggle between data and layout view. So layout, data. It's faster and easier to scroll around and move in data view, but layout view is where you make your map. And the first thing we see is we have these margins, which are useful if we're printing, but if we're going to export this as a Avenza ready PDF, or if we're going to incorporate this into a Word document, we don't need these margins. They only exist to help print out because printers can't go right to the edge of a page, so we want these to go away. We could drag and eyeball it as best we can, but it's better if we do it properly. So let's go to Layers, double click here on Layers in the table of contents, and go to the tab Size and Position. And this is asking where is this thing going to be measured off of, and we're going to measure it off the bottom left corner. And we don't want any offset at all, so we're going to hit 0, 0, which locks this bottom right down to the corner. And then this is an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, so the width is going to be 8.5 and the height 11. Now we can no longer use the scroll wheel to zoom in and out on the contents of the map. If we use the scroll wheel now, as I'm doing, it's just as if you're moving the paper closer to or farther from your face. This allows you to zoom in and make minute changes to the display, but it doesn't allow you to change what you're actually seeing on the map. To do that, you need to use this zoom in, zoom out magnifying glass, which is not the same as this. This one that's got the zoom 2% and all that, this is useful, and zoom to whole page, that shows everything. But you want to have this zoom in magnifying glass. Now if we want to be looking at this area, we can click, hold, drag, release a box around that area of interest. And now we see a little bit better what's going on here. We can repeat that. Click, hold, drag, release. And that gets us to where we want to be. And finally, my original map had a scale of 1 to 8,000, which means that 1 inch on this map equals 8,000 inches on the ground. So I'm going to type in 8,000. I don't need to do the 1 colon, just 8,000. It fills in the rest. And now we have these 4 intersections between road and stream in downtown Fort Kent. And now what's left to do is add the legend, the scale bar, the scale text, the north arrow, and the title. And we'll start with the title. And I've also labeled these roads for reference. So now we need to go to the drawing toolbar. And if you don't have this toolbar, go to Customize, Toolbars, Draw, and check that on. So what you're going to do is go to Text, and you have the option before you even start to select what kind of font you want, italics, size, etc. So I'm going to say I want a size, well, I'm doing a title, let's start with size 28. And I want that to be black, so we can keep that. And now I can just click where I want the text. And I called that Salted Roads Near Streams. Now I've hit enter, and that has not allowed me to do my second line, but if I double click on that, I can click here, add another line, downtown Fort Kent, Maine, and I want that to be centered, so I'm going to click here. So instead of justified left, I want this to be centered on top of that line. So there's my title, and that could be a bit bigger, so I can, while I have this selected, and I need to be using this Select Elements tool in the drawing toolbar to select. I can just type in whatever I want. So I figured out before 32 works pretty well. So that fits that right in there pretty nicely, and job done for the title. If I decide I want this whole map to move over a little bit, I can use this pan tool, looks like a hand. Click, hold, drag, release, and that gives me a little bit more room for my title. And this select elements is the same as this select elements, so either one will do. Click again on the title, and now I can get that right down to the bottom. Next up is the north arrow. Insert, north arrow. And for my original map, I used Esri North 29, and that's got the little star that shows Polaris, the North Star, so it can be pointing straight up. If it was a magnetic north, it would have 17 degrees magnetic declination applied. So you can hit OK, you can drag that around to where you want it. You can make it bigger by clicking and dragging on one of those little blue squares. Move it around. If you double click, you have the option to rotate that. So if you had a calibration angle of, if you wanted to set declination minus 17, now that's pointing at magnetic north. But because that's got the star on it, it should be pointing to true north, so that calibration angle should be 0. So there you are. Next up is the scale bar. So insert, scale bar. And I used alternating scale bar number 1. And you can go in and change the properties here, but I like to just hit OK, see what it gives me, and then work from there. So again, using this Select Elements tool, we can double click on that, and now I have the option to change everything about it. And I want to change everything about it. So when resizing, instead of adjust division value, we want adjust width. We want the division units to be in feet, and we want the division value to be 500. Apply, and that gives you 4 divisions, so 1, 2, 3, 4, each of which is 500 feet, and 4 subdivisions, 1, 2, 3, 4, with a label halfway in between, so every one of these subdivisions is 125 feet, 125, 250, 375, 500, and then increments of 500 after that. So that's that done. Okay. We can reposition that so it's all on the page. Next up, the scale text that shows if you print it out at 8.5 by 11, 1 inch will equal 667 feet. Insert, scale text. And again, we can just hit OK, see what it gives us. And, ooh, hello. So it wants to be in miles. Double clicking on that, we can change it. It's miles, 0.13 miles isn't really a very good measuring thing, so we can change this format map units from miles to feet. Okay. And this has given me much too much precision. Let's go ahead and change that. So double click when that loads up. I'm going to go to number format. And I'm going to say give me 0 decimal places. Thank you very much. Apply. 1 inch equals 667 feet. Okay. So now I can center that up. If I want to make it a little bigger, I can drag on one of those blue boxes. So now I have a scale bar, scale text, and now we need a legend. And the legend shows what all of these colors and symbols mean on the map. So insert, legend. And we'll just keep all the defaults. This is taking everything that's turned on right now and placing it in the legend. And easiest way, I think, is just hit next, 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 next. See what it gives you and work from there. If you want to change any of those things we just scrolled past, just double click, and they're all available under these different tabs. But for now, we need to clean up all of these titles. So these are what the data sets are called, but they're not really what you want the reader of your map to be seeing. So if you go back to your table of contents, you can either right click and go to Properties, and this is the slow way to do it. Go to General and call that Streams. Or you can just click once, wait a second, and then click again, and then whatever you type in there becomes the value that you see here in the legend. So we called that buffer intersect, and we called this one roads buffer 40 feet, and that lets the reader know how big that buffer is, and that's 40 feet from the road to that outer buffer, so from one side to the other would be 80 feet. We'll change the streams buffer to 75 feet, and we can make that legend bigger, more easily read, move it around. There it is. And now, last step is to add the names of the roads. So let's insert. Well, I'm going to insert text, easier way to do that. So you can insert text and go from there, but the easier way, let's just delete that. Easier way is to pick out how big you want it to be. Let's go with a size 14. We're going to label the roads, and we're going to use a font color that matches the feature, so we know the label goes with that feature. So now we can select the text, click where we want it to be, and say Route 11. When I hit enter, it's the right color. If I click on that to select it, I have the option to rotate that text. So just to the side of select elements, rotate, and it'll rotate around that X. So click, hold, drag, release when you have the angle you want. Go back to select elements and you can move that around and fine tune a little bit. Good. Now we can do the same for Route 1. Select that. We'll rotate that one down around the other way. Move that in place. Route 161. Drag that around. Finally, by convention, any water bodies, whether it's a lake or a stream or anything else, is labeled in blue italics. So we'll select italics, font color, the same Cretan blue, and we'll label, for now, just the Fish River. And that came in red, didn't listen to me very well, so if I select that, I can change the font color after the fact to Cretan blue, and then rotate it to match the orientation of the river. Line it right up there, and there we go. We have now replicated the original map that we had before. To export this as a PDF, oh dear, so now I have Route 161 in blue. It must have heard me for the wrong thing, and I can change that back to red. So now to export this as a PDF that can go into Avenza Maps on your phone, File, Export Map, and save as type PDF. I'm going to call this Lab 2 Demo 2. And before I export this, I want to go to the Advanced tab and make sure this box is checked, Export Map Georeference Information. What that's going to do is provide you with the coordinate system that allows your phone to interact through the GPS with this map. So save. Goes pretty quick for me. Yours will take a second longer. I have a very nice computer. Desktop. There's my PDF. And there is our shiny new map. So I'm going to close that. And I said at the beginning there are some flaws in this. And the big one is that the Fish River is not a line with no width. It is, in fact, a fairly wide river, and the wetlands layer actually gets that pretty well. So let's go back over to Data View, and I'm going to turn on the wetlands. And that just shows everything is the same color. We have lakes, we have wetlands, we have streams and rivers, all bunched up together. And now we're going to see something that is pretty well the core of all GIS, and that's called the attribute table. And you get to the attribute table by right-clicking on the layer in the table of contents and saying Open Attribute Table. And this is essentially a spreadsheet where every one of these rows corresponds to a feature on the ground or on the map. You can select any one of these, right-click right here and say Zoom to, and that is the feature. Feature ID, FID number 10, is this freshwater emergent wetland with these dimensions, 556 square meters, and that's what it is. So every one of these has one of these records, and it can contain just basically an infinite amount of data. You could have the name of it. If this is Joe's Wetland, you could have a name field there. You could have the town that it's in, the county that it's in, the state that it's in, that kind of thing. But for this, it's showing what kind of wetland it is, and that's the most easily used part of this data set. So I'm going to close this, and we're going to interact with that in just a moment. And right-click, zoom to layer, so we're seeing all the data again. And now I can zoom in just on downtown Fort Kent. So now double-click on wetlands, and go to the tab called Symbology. And now Categories, Unique Values, where the value field is Wetland Type, and that's the place we were just looking. And now once you've done that, hit Add All Values. Uncheck all other values. There are none, but if you don't uncheck this, it will show up in the legend and be problematic. And what we're going to do is show the rivers, lakes, and ponds as one color, and the wetlands as another. So if you double-click on that color swatch, let's just go with the default blue for rivers, lakes, and ponds. And we'll go with green for the wetlands. So these are what you would normally think of as a wetland, and this is not in fact land, this is open water. So now if we hit OK, we've now color-coded all of this, so we have the open water and the wet land. And what do you notice about this? Obviously, the 75-foot buffer around this line is not in fact representing the land surrounding the Fish River. Now, the PDF that we exported just a moment ago, the one that matches the one I showed you at the beginning, is part 1 of this lab. Part 2 is a buffer around these actual wetlands, and it doesn't matter if it's open water or a wetland or whatever else, anything in this layer. I'll tell you right now, the buffer tool works exactly the same on polygons as it does on lines. So I want you to replicate the analysis that you just did, the one with the lines, using this polygon feature instead, and produce a new map that shows and explains in the legend what it is that the reader is looking at. So you'll have the blue and green, just like this. You can turn off, not the roads, but you can turn off the old buffer intersect and the streams, and you'll repeat the analysis using a buffer around these polygon features. And I will be available for any questions as they come up. Good luck.